Welcome to a security conversation with Google about BeyondCorp Enterprise. I'm Andrew Livingstone, Principal Architect at StrataPrime. I've been a Google admin for over 12 years with 20 years of experience in the software industry. StrataPrime is a Google Cloud partner servicing organizations in the US and Canada. We have a strong specialization in work transformation, identity management, security, and compliance. We're experts in Google Workspace, Google Cloud Platform, Chrome Enterprise, and Google Voice. Now joining us today is a very talented Googler, Nora Dada. Nora, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, everyone. My name is Nora Dada. I'm a cloud architect at Google Canada. I've been at Google for a little bit over 2 years. Prior to joining Google, I have 12 years of experience in the telecommunication industry. Glad to be here, and thank you so much for the conversation.
Awesome. So our objective today is to talk about BeyondCorp Enterprise, which is a premium security offering from Google, and how it can be used to secure a remote or hybrid workforce. If anybody has questions today during our session, please enter them into the chat below, and a member of our team will get back to you directly with any questions that you have. So to get started, we should probably set the scene. So many companies today use trust-based networks to secure their systems and data centers using things like VPNs. These trust-based security models are 20 to 30 years old and offer a very narrow set of protection from today's threats, because it only takes a single compromised device or account to expose the entire network to threats like malware. So these companies, when they were faced with the pandemic, quickly pivoted to enable remote work. And to do that, they took these aging infrastructures and then had to rapidly scale them to support their entire workforce being remote. Those were temporary Band-Aid solutions that are now 2 to 3 years old. And these companies are now realizing that they need something that's more scalable and comprehensive from a security perspective to really protect remote workers, because that's something that doesn't appear to be going away anytime soon. So before we talk about what a solution could look like, we should spend a few minutes just talking about the risks in a bit more detail, because this is really what our conversation is about today. So Nora, with remote and hybrid workers, what do you see as the top security risks and issues?
Right. Employees, as you know, Andrew, they're not anymore required or to be confined in one network or one workspace, which means that people can really work from anywhere, from the cafeteria, from the restaurant, from anywhere they are. So this is definitely a big risk, because legacy architecture or legacy system did not make the infrastructure immune to threats that emerged from the era of hybrid work. As you know, also, there is a lot of motion for people to use their own devices, so they could unintentionally or accidentally leak some important information like IP or sensitive data for their own companies. So in my view, there are 3 main risks that are generated or emerged from this hybrid work. The first one is compromised accounts. So people can have their accounts password kind of stolen. People kind of being hostage for others people to access to their own data. The second one is basically data loss. So, you know, if you have like important or sensitive data in your company, this can be leaked. And the third one, which is like threats from some sort of like ransomware or like malware. Those things, Andrew, are not new. Those have been there for a while. What's new is the level of sophistication. So it's becoming really harder and harder for IT professionals to figure out ways to protect their infrastructures for remote workers. As you know, also the legacy system architecture are composed from many different third-party vendors. So when you talk about like firewalls, routers, gateway for things that employees need to access their infrastructure while they're outside the office, those systems need to have the latest and the greatest update for security. So it's super important to be always up to date. So what we look at, like the older systems kind of becoming more of a burden for IT professionals, because they always have to keep up to date with the security kind of measures. And there is a need for like to be proactive about those type of threats. So companies have to always do like a review for what makes sense for remote and hybrid scenarios. We're going to talk about it a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, I mean, just the threat of trying to keep pace with the patching for this many, different solutions that comprise, your security posture. That's a real challenge for many companies. It's been a challenge at companies that I've worked at in the past as well. Picking up on this thread, so because, your security posture is defined by these many pieces, what do you think is happening in terms of detection and awareness when there's threats that exist, or even when there's been an actual compromise?
This is a huge problem in terms of being proactive and protective for your own environment. It's really hard, in my opinion, to know the exact level of severity of these incidents because a lot of people suffer it but don't report it necessarily. And there is many different reasons for people have accidents unreported because first thing first is your reputation for your business. You don't want it to impact that. People might lose jobs. You might also, believe it or not, lack of awareness of these threats. So people have been kind of accidentally get their network get compromised, but they don't know what to do. Also, processes are complex. So assuming that the security incidents happen and resolved, what do you do next to make sure it's not going to happen again for the next employees or in the future or near future? So it's really becoming a risk. What's really frustrating also to know, we're going to share the link also, a recent study by the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. Between 5 to 10% of businesses report those incidents, which is really scary numbers.
So it's particularly scary to think about over 90% of the incidents go unreported. And, in my own thinking about this, I think it's because these companies probably lack, a security operations function. So they don't have maturity just around security event detection, but they also probably lack the instrumentation. And I think that might speak to some of the investments that Google's made.
Right. This is one of the many reasons Google have invested on security to make sure companies are protected against certain scenarios like that. As you know, we have our own zero trust model, which was invented in 2011. We shifted the focus from network to user and devices. The same zero trust model, Google decided to commercialize it. 2017, which we know it today is called the BeyondCorp Enterprise, is the only solution where every request being reauthorized from application to application or user to application or application to infrastructure. So we make sure everything or everyone access the information that they need to access to.
Yeah, we're going to get into BeyondCorp Enterprise in a bit more detail in a second, but I think that really does set the scene around, you have remote workers. You need to ensure that you have comprehensive security that's looking at not only account protection, protecting data, but then continuously authorizing their requests.
That's correct.
And then I think another best practice that we can say is making sure that you have a security operations function that has both detection and reporting capabilities so that you can fulfill any obligations that you have to your industry compliance organizations or to your customers. So let's take a look at BeyondCorp Enterprise and how it can be used to secure remote workers. So taking a look first at the history, right? So you mentioned the origin story here behind BeyondCorp Enterprise starts back in 2011. So that's when Google first developed the BeyondCorp security model for internal use at Google to solve the problem of having Googlers work around the world without VPN. Because at the time, Google was using trust-based networks like VPNs for their employees. And they sought to find a better way to do this. So they found their solution in a security framework called Zero Trust Security. And in a Zero Trust Security framework, it's one where we never trust the user and we assume that all networks are hostile. And instead of using a trust-based authentication one-time login like a VPN, we use contextual factors to validate a user's access to an application or a service and then continuously verify those on each and every request. So it's not just a one-time verification. And that's what lends this excellent protection that we see from these security models. So after Google built that internally, as Nora said, they then made it available to Google Cloud and Google Workspace customers in the products. And then you fast forward to the present, and Google now has BeyondCorp Enterprise as a standalone commercial offering that can add premium security features to Google Cloud and Google Workspace customers, but can also be used by Microsoft customers or AWS customers to protect their infrastructure or applications hosted in those environments.
So Andrew, how does it work?
Well, so there's actually two complementary sets of features here. So there's a set of features in BeyondCorp Enterprise that protect infrastructure. So that's protecting resources that are hosted at Google Cloud Platform, protecting resources, services, applications that are hosted elsewhere, like at Microsoft Azure or AWS or on-premise. So that's one pillar of BeyondCorp Enterprise. And we're not going to talk about that one today. Nora and I will probably cover that in a future session. Today, we're going to talk about the second pillar, which is really about protecting end users, because that's our use case for today is hybrid workers. Now, the features that support hybrid workers tend to focus on protecting web applications that a user has access to, being able to apply data loss prevention controls to protect against data exfiltration. And the way this works is it starts with Chrome browser as the end user facing client. And BeyondCorp Enterprise will work with other browsers, but it works best with Chrome. So when an end user signs into Chrome, an extension is pushed by policy to that user's browser. And that extension has line of sight to the device, to the network, to the operating system, to pull in all of these contextual factors, including partner signals that might be on the device from other third-party services like anti-malware, to build this full picture of these different contextual factors that can be used to validate a user's access. So for our remote or hybrid workers, what that allows us to do is effectively create a company-managed profile within Chrome that can control access to which applications a user has access to. So once we've actually authenticated a user into an application, we then can actually apply things like data loss prevention controls. So if this is an application where we want one of our users who's remote to be read-only because we don't want them to download data to what might be a personal device, BeyondCorp Enterprise can prevent the download of data. And also thinking about multi-cloud scenarios, perhaps we don't want this user to be able to copy-paste information into another cloud application. BeyondCorp Enterprise can prevent the copy-paste of that data into other applications. And those blocks, the download and the copy-paste, they can be just wholesale blocks or can actually be contextual based on data loss prevention, looking for sensitive data in those documents. Now, these protections with Chrome extend also into some other really interesting areas when we think about remote workers, and that deals with acceptable use. So, what applications do I want these users to have access to? Do I want them to be able to sign into personal accounts? And then protecting them with some of BeyondCorp Enterprise's real-time URL scanning and real-time malware protection, so that if a user is interacting with a system that is potentially behind our firewalls, ensuring that we're scanning files and content so we're not introducing malware into the environment. So this is how it begins to work to form the sort of secure framework around, really conditionally providing access into applications for these users and allowing IT administrators to define group-specific policies by user group.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. As a Googler, we have been using this for over a decade. The solution is super easy to use and also flexible. It helps companies not only to improve their security posture, but also give them the flexibility to configure whichever policy that works for them and for their use cases.
I think it's really important that you talk about that, Nora, the flexibility and the fact that it's seamless, right? So a lot of times when you think about protecting remote workers today, we're thinking about VPNs and VDI solutions that are kind of clunky and that can also contribute to negative user experience, as well as increases in IT operations costs. Troubleshooting VPN passwords, I've been there. I've been that guy where I can't get my token to work and I've ended up calling the help desk. So the fact that BeyondCorp Enterprise really is an application layer protection and it's a single vendor product, it reduces the number of points of integration, which makes it a simpler solution, not only for users, but for IT as well.
Right.
And of course, there's multiple benefits to this that can be explored. It's really about putting together the set of features that make sense for your use case, right? If it's remote workers where we want to have a read-only posture, it's really locking them down. So there's no download and upload capabilities, but it can also be, things that really focus on better integrating with applications that might be in these third-party locations and doing that within a single vendor solution. So to kind of wrap this up, I think what we should probably do is show a quick demo of what this looks like for, one of our remote workers to sort of highlight some of the things that we've talked about today.
Awesome. Let's go for the demo.
So in this short demo, we're going to show a few different use cases for our remote worker interacting with web applications, showing the ability for BeyondCorp Enterprise to secure access to company data. So where this starts is with our end user who's signing into Google Drive. And because they're on a managed device, they're able to access the Drive service, but we don't want them to be able to download data. So when the user goes to download this file, the download will be blocked by company policy because we don't want this user to be able to download this information onto their physical device. Now, this same protection can extend to any web application, even third-party applications. So in this example, we've got a user who's now moved over into Box, and they're trying to do the same thing, download files to their computer. But in this case, we're blocking it because we want Box to be a read-only system, and we don't want these files, which are sensitive, to be on the user's physical device. Now we can see that this protection also extends to uploads because this user tried to upload or exfiltrate data into Box, and we've also blocked that. Now, these protections can apply to files just wholesale by putting blocks on each of these applications as we've seen, but we can also use contextual factors using data loss prevention to scan for sensitive content. So in this example here, we've got a user who's interacting with their clipboard, and they've opened a sensitive document, and they're trying to paste it into a third-party web application, in this case Evernote. Now, this paste is just completely blocked because we haven't authorized Evernote as an application to be used. So now the user pivots into Keep, and they're trying to do this again. Now in Google Keep, it's allowing them to paste the document. But when they go back and they try to paste it again, but including some sensitive data elements, in this case a payment card number, the data loss prevention controls is blocking the paste. And what this is really demonstrating is that you have this flexibility to block the entire interaction that the user has or be selective. Now in your use case, that might be, hey, I've got this user who has access to Salesforce for read-only access, but I don't want them to be able to download information or upload information into that system. And when you think about remote workers who are on devices that we may not own or may not be fully managing, this provides a lot of control. So in our last example here, we're going to kind of dip our toes into the Google Cloud Platform waters and say that this is a remote worker who's not in an authorized location. So we don't want them to be able to access Google Cloud Platform to interact with our infrastructure. When they try to go to the Google Cloud Platform console, they are denied and given an error message indicating that they need to be in an approved location. So this short demo shows the user experience to the user in that it is very seamless. They're just interacting with these applications, and depending on the context or the policies, they're being given error messages as to why these things are happening.
That's right, Andrew. From my own experience, BeyondCorp Enterprise not only provide companies a seamless experience to improve their security posture, but it's also extremely simple to implement. So you can do it without impacting your overlay architecture. It's also very important that you can also implement DLP on your own personal devices, so people can have more flexibility to use their own devices, but at the same time get these policies enforced on those devices, which is something we see it more trendy now with the remote work. My takeaway is really like BeyondCorp Enterprise, it's really important factor to improve your data security. So you know exactly how your data can be shared, and you have more tighter control about what can be shared outside your organization. It can also improve your compliancy against certain compliances such as GDPR or HIPAA. One also important factor to mention, which is basically the data governance. So you have ability to control who within your organization have access to these sensitive data. And most importantly, at the C-suite level, it's really provide a seamless experience to your user, your IT administrative as well, because you don't have any more these complex tool and software updates that every user have to do on their own machines.
Yeah, I think the thing I would add there is when you talk about compliance and C-suite, is that with some of the customers that I've been working with for BeyondCorp Enterprise, one of the reasons that they're seeking it out is actually cybersecurity insurance. Right. It's now coming up on questionnaires like, do you have zero trust security? Insurers, when they're underwriting policies, are actually looking into what's happening in your environment and auditing it. And the fact of the matter is that companies that have fully implemented zero trust security, protecting against credential theft and exfiltration of data, pay lower premiums. And those are things that C-suite really does care about because it's about mitigating risk.
Right. And also save cost, because think about the legal fees. If these data being kind of leaked outside your organization, there might be some certain fines and other complications that companies go through.
Absolutely.
So this would definitely help.
Yeah, the other area I've seen it come up too is in contractual requirements. So customers that deal with state and federal agencies in the US, some government agencies in Canada, financial institutions, it's now in vendor agreements, like around how you actually secure access to your own systems and your own accounts. So there's kind of a mutual, like kind of enforcing the same set of policies that's happening. And if you're not doing these things today, you need to make sure it's in your plans for next fiscal year because you're going to start to be left behind if you're not embracing zero trust security.
Right. That's a really good summary. Thank you, Andrew.
No worries. So before we wrap up our demo, let's get to a few pre-submitted questions.
All right, so we have submitted questions. Question number 1, how do you get BeyondCorp Enterprise? What does implementation look like?
Okay, so kind of two pieces to unpack there. So how do you get it is that it's a premium security offering from Google that is priced on a per user per month basis. So effectively what you're looking at is licensing the users that you want to protect with these zero trust security features, and that gets you access to the things that we talked about today, like the additional contextual factors to do device trust, the DLP and download and upload protection in Chrome, the real-time safe browsing and malware scanning, and the things that we're going to cover on the infrastructure side. That's what's included in the licensing fees. Now, what does rollout look like? So if you're an existing Google Workspace and Google Cloud Platform customer, rollout is very easy. The licenses get assigned in the admin console, and the policies get configured in the Google Workspace admin console and the Google Cloud Platform console with just some new menus that become available to you. Now, if you're not using Google Workspace or Google Cloud and you're in a Microsoft environment or an AWS environment, there is some additional configuration required for you because you will need to set up a GCP tenant and set up some of the networking components to proxy the traffic to your applications through Google Cloud. But once that's done, it's a very simple task from there to basically move some IP addresses so that your applications are being protected.
This is awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, so the second question we had was, does this solution work only for organizations that use Google Workspace and Google Cloud Platform?
It actually can be implemented for both if you are working with Google Workspace or if your application is also hosted in Google Cloud or not Google Cloud. For example, we have a big customers. They're protecting their user using BeyondCorp Enterprise, but the application is actually hosted in AWS. So it works best with Google Workspace, but you can also have the flexibility and the ability to use other cloud providers.
Yeah, that is a pattern I've seen with a couple of large customers as well, that where they're using AWS as an example for their dev stack, but their users are in Workspace, and they've been able to bridge the gap there with BeyondCorp to have a holistic solution across both environments.
Right. All right. Question number 3. If a customer is using BeyondCorp Enterprise Chrome extension, what happens if they open an incognito mode?
You seem to have these two-part questions for me every time. So, okay. So if they're using BeyondCorp Enterprise, and as we talked about today, what happens is that there's an extension called Endpoint Verification that's pushed into Chrome that acts as our policy agent to collect information from the device. So what happens if a user tries to bypass that by going into incognito mode? Okay, so the first thing to note here is we have the ability through our policies to force users into Chrome, right? So if we want to enforce a single corporate browser, we can do that so that users couldn't access these applications in any other browser. The second thing to note is there's also a policy decision to be made about incognito mode. Do you want to allow your users to do that? It's along the lines of also determining if you want them to be able to sign into their personal Gmail accounts in the same browser window. A lot of organizations do not allow that, right? Because they want to keep users in a managed profile when they're accessing company applications. So most companies I work with will actually, for a secure profile, disable incognito and also disable personal account access. But let's say that it was allowed and a user goes into incognito mode. If we had any device policies protecting that application, incognito mode is not going to get you there. Because when you're interacting with the application, BeyondCorp Enterprise is evaluating the policies to say, are you on a trusted device or are you on a trusted network or what's the security posture? If you're in incognito, you don't have that extension. There's no access to that information. So your access would be effectively blocked. So very interesting question, Nora.
Thank you, Andrew, for answering. And
I think that takes us to the end of the pre-submitted questions. If anybody has questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and a member of our team will get back to you. But at this point, I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in today, and I wanted to thank you, Nora, for joining us and spending some time with us on this topic. We will be posting a one-page summary on StrataPrime.com, so if you wanted to get some more information about BeyondCorp Enterprise or reach out to either of us, we'd be happy to connect with you. Thanks very much, and we'll see you on the next one.
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrew.